Thomas Quick is a child molester and alleged serial killer, with over 30 murder confessions and born in Sweden. He has confessed to committing murder and rape, victimizing mainly men in Sweden and Norway, with the first known murder committed when he was 14. He changed his name after this and adapted the first name from that of his first victim, Thomas Blomgren, and surname Quick, his mother's maiden name. According to his autobiographical book Kvarblivelse, his father abused him as a child, something which his brother, Sture Bergwall, denies. In the book Min bror Thomas Quick, In de Muinoinder, Berättelse om det ofattbara, My Brother Thomas Quick, a story about the incomprehensible. He was arrested in 1990 for attempting to rob a bank outside Falun, Sweden. During his years in Säter hospital, receiving treatment for being criminally insane, he started to confess to numerous murders, and he was convicted for 8 of them. Critics of the confessions and the trials claim that Quick never murdered anyone, but that he is a compulsive liar. Among the critics are the parents of a child he confessed to having murdered in the late 1970s. In response to these accusations, Quick himself wrote an article for the Swedish newspaper Dagens Nyheter in 2001, where he said that he refused to cooperate further with the authorities concerning all open murder investigations. In November 2006, Thomas Quick's trials were reported to the Swedish Chancellor of Justice by a retired lawyer, Pelle Svensson, on behalf of 2 of the murder victims' relatives who wished to have the trials declared invalid and, presumably, have Quick retried. Thomas Quick is a convicted Swedish serial killer who has confessed to more than 30 murders, although he has only 8 convictions, one of which has been overturned. With no technical evidence, the only evidence police have held on Quick is his confessions and elements in these confessions that have been judged to match classified facts from the police dossiers on the crimes in question, e.g., clothing and birthmarks of victims. The credibility of Quick's confessions has been widely debated in the Swedish media. Critics of these confessions and the trials claim that Quick never murdered anyone, but that he is a compulsive liar. In December 2009, Quick recanted his confessions and denied taking part in any of the murders for which he was convicted. Quick has since changed his name to his baptismal name, Sture Bergwall. In 1990-1991, Quick was sentenced to lengthy prison terms for armed robbery and consigned to closed psychiatric care. During therapy, he confessed to some 20 murders committed in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland between 1964 and 1993. One of his confessions led to the solving of an 18-year-old murder considered to be unsolvable, and another to the informal solving of a murder in Växjö in 1964. The 1964 crime had passed the then Swedish 25-year limit of punitive, but with the information given by Quick, the murderer was considered to be found. His story matched information that had never been published about the crime. Over time, Quick was convicted of 8 murders at 6 different trials. In Sweden, a defendant always gets access to the whole police investigation before the trial. In Sweden, the years following 1990, when Quick was sentenced to closed psychiatric confinement, he confessed to several unsolved murders. His first murder, according to his accounts, occurred in Växjö in 1964, when Quick was only 14 years old. The victim, Thomas Blomgren, was described by Quick as the same age, but not as strong and tall as himself. The second alleged victim was Alvar Larsson, whom Quick claimed to have murdered at Sirkön in the Lake Osnen outside the town of Urshult. According to Quick's sister, he never left Falun at the time of this murder. The credibility of Quick's confessions had been widely debated in the Swedish media since 1993, up until 2008, when Quick withdrew all of his confessions. There have been consistent doubts about the reliability of his statements, and some of his confessions have been proven to be fabrications. In some cases, the victims have turned up alive and well. Another dubious circumstance is that no witnesses have ever testified to seeing Quick in the proximity of any of the crime scenes, even though more than 10,000 people were interviewed for intricate details. Critics of these confessions and the trials claim that Quick never murdered anyone, but that he is a compulsive liar. Among the critics are the parents of a child he confessed to having murdered in the late 1970s. In response to these accusations, Quick himself wrote an article for the Swedish newspaper Dagens Nyheter in 2001, in which he said that he refused to cooperate further with the authorities concerning all open murder investigations. In November 2006, Thomas Quick's trials were reported to the Swedish Chancellor of Justice by retired lawyer Pelle Svensson on behalf of two relatives of a murder victim who wished to have the trials declared invalid. Several principals in the fields of law and psychiatry, among them Swedish police professor Leif G.W. Persson, journalist and writer Jan Guillou, and secret sources in the Swedish police, all claim that Quick is mentally unstable, but not guilty in many, if any, of the crimes to which he has confessed. They describe the handling of the Quick cases as the most scandalous chapter of Scandinavian crime history, branding it as glaring incompetence, naivete, and opportunism within the police and judicial system. Quick withdrew all of his confessions in 2008 during the taping of a TV documentary. Quick's attorney now contends that the prosecution withheld important investigative material from the defense, which the prosecution adamantly denies. Quick's attorney also maintains that his client has a mental illness and had been under the influence of narcotics prescribed by a doctor when he confessed to the killings. Thomas Quick, now Sture Bergwall, recanted his confessions and requested that the Svea Court of Appeals order a new trial for the murder case of Yenon Levi at Rörshyttan. In December 2009, the appeals court granted a retrial of the Yenon Levi case. As the prosecutor found that the evidence was insufficient, Quick moved for a judgment of acquittal and was acquitted in September 2010. Quick's defense counsel also declared his intention to ask for a retrial of the Therese Johannessen case, claiming that Quick has an alibi for the day when Therese Johannessen was abducted and murdered. SKL, Statens Kriminaltekniska Laboratorium, State Forensic Technical Laboratory, found in March 2010 that two forensic objects, which the prosecution had claimed were bone fragments, were in fact small pieces of charred wood. Swedish serial killer Thomas Quick was convicted for the 1988 murder of the Israeli tourist Yenon Levi. This is his fourth conviction for the serial killer, who has confessed to 15 killings. The sentence will be passed in 2 weeks and will probably result in continued confinement at Säter sjukhus, Sweden's high-security asylum for the criminally insane. Following instructions from Swedish serial killer Thomas Quick, Norwegian police found bone fragments from a calf that are believed to be of 9-year-old Therese Johannessen. The case, and one of Norway's most notorious murders, was under investigation for almost 10 years. The girl disappeared from a residential area in Drammen on July 3, 1988. Nothing was ever heard of her again until March 30, 1996, when Quick confessed to abducting and killing her. He described her wristwatch with great detail and pointed out a gravel pit near the pond where he supposedly buried her. Sweden's most prolific serial killer to date was a sadistic necrophile who preferred children as victims, but that did not stop him from killing adults, wiping out whole families when the opportunity presented itself. Like Gerard Schaefer, Quick originally wanted to become a priest, but he drifted into random homicide instead, reportedly claiming his first victim at age 14. Arrested in 1996, he describes a childhood fraught with physical and sexual abuse, then confessed to 15 homicides, including 6 in Norway. Quick's confession solved the mystery of 3 Dutch tourists murdered while vacationing in northern Sweden, and he was sentenced to life for those crimes. On May 28, 1997, Quick was also convicted of killing an Israel tourist, Yenon Levi, in 1988. 4 months later, following Quick's directions, police unearthed what could be a human finger bone from the cellar of an abandoned farmhouse near Falun. Still, the victim was not identified and no further charges were filed. In November 1997, Norwegian detectives found human bone fragments in a gravel pit near Drammen, where 9-year-old Therese Johannessen vanished in July 1988. Quick has confessed to her slaying and describes the child's wristwatch in meticulous detail. Investigation into Quick's crimes and confessions continues at this writing, while Quick remains confined at Säter sjukhus, Sweden's maximum security institution for the criminally insane. Authorities speculate that his body count may finally exceed the 15 confessed victims, but whatever the ultimate total, Quick will probably remain at the asylum for the rest of his life. Thomas Quick was born in 1950 in the small town of Korsnäs, Sweden, but under Sture Bergwall. He had a rough childhood, or so he says himself. Many believe that everything that Quick has said about his murders and his childhood is a lie. Some criminal professors say that he hasn't harmed a single human being. Still, Quick has confessed to over 30 killings in Sweden between 1964 and 1994, a 30-year killing spree. Quick brother has written a book called My Brother Thomas Quick. The book describes Thomas as a liar and a sick human being. Quick has said that during his childhood he got raped by his father and abused by his mother. Quick's father supposedly got disgusted when Quick came into puberty at the age of 11 and stopped sexually abusing Quick. But this had left a mark, and Quick still believes today that because of his father's abuse he got a sick and perverted view of sex. When he was 12, he used to play a game in the showers with the other boys in the school called the strangulation game. He strangled the boys and touched their private parts. Quick said he did it for pleasure. But none of the other boys suspected anything because at that time the boys found the human body to be interesting. When he turned 14, he met with an older man in his 20s who had a car. They used to travel on the Swedish roads looking for young boys that they could pick up and molest. Quick would talk the boys into it and have anal sex with them while the older man was watching from the driver's seat. One weekend, the man drove Quick to a Tivoli. Quick met a boy his age named Thomas Blomgren, Quick's first victim. Quick took him out in the woods and strangled him to death. Then he touched the boy's penis and took his shirt and disappeared into the woods. On his way home from the Tivoli, Quick told the man about what he had done, but he had to make him promise that he wouldn't tell anyone anything. 1 year later, Quick pushes an 8-year-old boy into a river, and the boy drowns. No one ever saw what happened, so the case was closed because they thought it was an accident. After some years, Quick began experimenting with drugs, so he was sent to a rehab where he spent some time. He also killed a 13-year-old boy during his rehab visit. He began working as a medic. He tried to strangle a boy that slept. He called a priest and confessed the whole thing. The police arrested him for a murder attempt, and he had to stay in a psychic ward for 3 years. Quick said he killed one person during these 3 years, and he said that the security was terrible. They even let him out when he wanted. The story goes on, and the kills go on. In 1990, Quick and a 16-year-old boy robbed a bank and took the bank manager's family hostage. They got arrested, and Quick went to prison. After some time in prison, Quick realized he was getting out pretty soon. This was his only chance to confess his murders and escape from his dark thoughts of murder. At this time, Thomas Quick took the name Thomas Quick. Before that, he was Sture Bergwall, Thomas for his first victim. His first victim was Thomas Blomgren. To date, Thomas Quick has confessed to over 30 murders. However, he has only been charged for 8 of them. In 2001, Quick decided to stop attending trials. He was tired of no one believing him. And no one really knows when Thomas Quick will start confessing murders again or when the police will bring back old cases. In many cases, Quick has been able to give the police information they didn't know about, and in many other cases, he can't remember anything. He knows he's involved. What's so fascinating about Quick is that he never got caught with murder. The police never took him. He had to confess before they could get him.